Hello everyone. This video is on segments in a triangle. The first segment we're going to talk about is the median of a triangle. And the median of a triangle is a segment that goes from a vertex of a triangle to the midpoint of the opposite side. So hypothetically, if I were to find the midpoint of this side, meaning these two segments would be congruent. If I draw a segment from vertex A to that midpoint, this here would be a median. If I found the midpoint of, say, AB, remember, midpoint is the point that divides a segment into two equal segments. Now I can draw a median from that midpoint to, say, vertex C. Now, if I wanted to, I could also draw one, find the midpoint of AC, and draw this median here. So every triangle can have up to 3 medians. And what you have to understand is the median basically gives you midpoint. So the first example here, TW is the median. So they're telling you that this segment is the median. So they tell you ST is x plus 40, SW is 2x plus 30, and WV is 5x minus 6. Well, what you have to understand is if this is the median, W is the midpoint, making these two segments congruent. Therefore, I know 2x plus 30 is equal to 5x minus 6. If I go ahead and solve, I would get negative 3x equals negative 36. Divide by negative 3, I get x is equal to 12. If x is 12, now I can find the length of each segment. 2 times 12 plus 30 would give me 24 plus 30. SW is 54. Since SW and WV are congruent, I know right away WV, right, is going to be 54. And then ST, sorry, this should be WV. ST then would just be 12 plus 40, which is 52. Okay, that's all based off of given the median. Now, an altitude is a segment that goes from a vertex of a triangle perpendicular to the opposite side. Now, again, every triangle can have 3 altitudes. In an acute triangle, right, there's one altitude. There's another altitude. And there's another altitude. Right? When you look at this, all of the segments go from a vertex perpendicular to the opposite side. In a right triangle, one side is the altitude and the other side is the altitude. Now, when I draw an altitude from this vertex to this vertex, I would get that. So in an acute triangle, and to be honest, that would be like that. In an acute triangle, all of the altitudes are inside. A right triangle, the legs are in altitude, and you get one that goes to the hypotenuse. In an obtuse triangle, you have one altitude, right? But to get the other altitudes, what I have to do is extend this side, and now I can drop an altitude. If I wanted to go from this vertex, right, I would extend this side, and now I can drop that altitude. Basically, you have to understand that altitudes are important because they basically represent the height of a triangle. So looking at example 2, you're given BC is an altitude. If BC is an altitude, right, what this and this tell you are they're basically distractors. Okay, what you need to know is if BC is an altitude, that angle measure, 2x minus 8, these angles are going to be right angles. So that would equal 90 degrees. And now if I go and solve for x, 2x equals 98, x is equal to 49. Okay? Now, a perpendicular bisector is a segment that is perpendicular to another segment at its midpoint. So basically, if I find the midpoint of a side, right? Midpoint gives me two congruent segments. Then I drop a line perpendicular to that segment at its midpoint. Remember, this does not have to start at a vertex. Okay? Does not have to start at a vertex. So example 3. DE is a perpendicular bisector of AC. If AC is 22, so from here to here, AC is 22. Find the value of x, y, and the measure of BC, it should be, sorry. So to find x, think about it. This is a perpendicular bisector, I know. AE is congruent to EC because I know E is the midpoint. Well, if the whole segment is 22, 22 divided by 2 tells me this segment is 11 units long, this segment is 11. So I basically can say 2x plus 4 is equal to 11. If I subtract 4, 2x equals 7. Divide by 2, x is equal to 7 halves, or 3.5. Now, because this is a perpendicular bisector, I also know that at that intersection are right angles, meaning 90 degrees. So I know 3y plus 6 would equal 90. Subtract 6, 3y equals 84. Divide by 3, y is equal to 28. And I am done. So a perpendicular bisector gives you two things, right angles and midpoint. If I wanted to find BC, I'm going to plug x in here. 3.5 plus 5 will give you 8.5. Now a midsegment is a segment whose endpoints are the midpoint of two sides of a triangle. So if I find the midpoint of this side and I find the midpoint of this side, and I connect those, I get a midsegment. So this here is the midsegment. Now notice two things happen here. Number one, the midsegment is parallel to the third side. Meaning, if this is my third side, right? This is parallel to this. Now, second is the midsegment is equal to half the third side. So third side divided by 2. Or we could say the third side is equal to 2 times the midsegment. Now every triangle can have up to 3 midsegments. So if I look at this one, connect those midpoints. This line would be parallel to this line. If I draw a third one in, like this, that midsegment would be parallel to that line. So for example 4, find x. Well, I know this is half of 70. So 5x is equal to 70 divided by 2. So 5x is equal to 35. So x is equal to 7. And that's because the midsegment is equal to the third side divided by 2. Now, here, if I look at this, right, I know midsegment, or 2 times the midsegment, is equal to the third side. So if I take 2 times the length of the mid-segment, that should equal 45. So 2x minus 2 equals 45 by distributing. 2x equals 47. X is equal to 47 over 2, or 23.5. That would be x. All right, example 6. In each of the triangles, determine if AB is perpendicular bisector, angle bisector, altitude, or median. Because AB goes from a vertex, creating that right angle, right? I know right away that this is going to be an altitude. If I look at AB here, right? It doesn't start at a vertex, but it creates a right angle and it creates midpoint. So I know this is a perpendicular bisector. AB here goes from a vertex. These two congruent segments tell me B is the midpoint. Vertex to midpoint of the opposite side. That's a median. And here it shows this angle is congruent to that angle. Therefore, AB is the angle bisector. Okay, use a figure to name an angle bisector, median, perpendicular bisector, and altitude. So right away, let's look for an angle bisector. I'm looking for 2 congruent angles, which ends up being here and here. So the angle bisector would be segment EB. Median, I'm looking for a midpoint. So I know C is a midpoint because these are congruent. So I'm going to follow that midpoint up to a vertex of the triangle, and that would tell me FC is a median. Perpendicular bisector, I'm looking for a right angle. Here I see a right angle. Now, C is the midpoint. What segment is perpendicular to it at its midpoint? Perpendicular bisector would be ray CA. In an altitude, I'm looking for another right angle right here. Follow that segment down to the vertex, and DG, right? You could also name that, or GD is an altitude. So, mark the triangle to reflect AC as a median. If AC is a median, when we go from vertex A to C, this would have to be the midpoint. So BC would have to be marked congruent to CD. Example 9. If AC is a median, you are able to use the given information to find X or Y. Find that variable. Right? Here, I can use this information. I can't use it to find Y, because Y represents angle measures and a median gives me midpoint. So I know right away from A to C, that's a midpoint. So that's congruent to that. So I can find X by setting those measures equal to each other. Subtract 2x, add 8, 5x equals 15, x is equal to 3. Here, dB is an altitude. All right, if dB is an altitude, I know I get right angles there. Tells you AD is x plus 1. DC is 2x plus 5. And angle C, DB, is going to be 90 degrees. This given information is what I need to use to find X. I know 4x plus 4x plus 10 is equal to 90. Subtract 10, 4x is equal to 80. Divide, x is equal to 20. Now I can find AD and CD by plugging that in. 20 plus 1 is 21. 2 times 20 plus 5 is going to give you 45. All right, example 11. AE is a perpendicular bisector. If DA is 3x minus 1, AB is 23, CD is x plus 1. BC is 2x plus 4. And angle DAE is 6y plus 36. Well, a perpendicular bisector gives me two things. Tells me A is a midpoint, so these segments are congruent. So if AB is 23, this is 23. So to find x, 3x minus 1 equals 23. So 3x equals 24, x is equal to 8. Now, to find y, I know 6y plus 36 is equal to 90. So 6y equals 90 minus 36 is going to be 54. Y is equal to 9. Now AD, we know, is 23. CD, once I know x, 8 plus 1 is 9. BC is 2 times 8 plus 4, which is going to be 20. And AB, we already know, is 23. Oops. Example 12. They tell you M and N are midpoints. Now that tells me if M, N, and P are midpoints, I know all three of these segments are mid-segments. So if I take this side here and I take this side here, YZ I know is going to be 2 times 22. YZ would be 44 units long. Now, I know MN is 24. XZ is going to be 2 times 24, which is 48. So if that whole thing is 48, and this is the midpoint, and P is the midpoint, 48 divided by 2, that's 24. That's 24. So PZ is 24. Now, the perimeter of that inner triangle is 60. So 60 minus 22 minus 24. What is that going to give me? 60 minus 46 is 14. So I know that's 14. And if I look at it, NP is 14. That should give you an idea about the homework. Go ahead, complete it, and let us know if you have any questions.